Hello and welcome to The Gist. I'm your host, Chris Vetrano, here every week to break down all the things happening in pop culture and interviewing the people that make it pop. Today, we're deep diving into one of the most celebrated pop culture icons and frankly, one of the greatest artists of my life. Of course, I'm talking about Miss Independent herself, Kelly Clarkson. She has crossed over from pop to rock to country to daytime TV, and her career is so illustrious that I couldn't do it alone. So I had to bring in reinforcements, true experts of all things Kelly Clarkson, to help me cover it. They are the hosts of Miss Indepodcast, a podcast completely dedicated to the world's first American Idol. Kelly Clarkson, here to join me, Jeremy and Pam. Welcome to The Gist.
Thank you.
Hi, Chris.
Thank you so much for reaching out. This was so lovely. I checked out your podcast and I was like, this is going to be really fun. So you are lovely. And I'm so excited to talk all things Kelly, as always.
Yeah.
Yes, you guys do it regularly. I mean, you guys have found every nook and cranny of the Kelly Clarkson story to talk about. And so I don't know what we're going to, uncover today that maybe you haven't already covered. But like I said, she's got a incredible career. And so for listeners, just a little bit so that they kind of ground us into why Kelly Clarkson, why are we talking about her today? Kelly Clarkson was the first winner of American Idol in 2002, has since recorded 10 full-length albums, sold over 25 million albums and 45 million singles worldwide. She has 11 top 10 singles in the US and was the first artist in history to top each of the Billboard's pop, adult, contemporary, adult pop, country, and dance charts. In addition to her incredible music career, she has regularly served as a coach on 9 seasons of NBC's The Voice and hosts her own wildly successful, award-winning daytime talk show, The Kelly Clarkson Show. Among her numerous accolades, Clarkson has received 3 Grammy Awards, 4 American Music Awards, 2 Academy of Country Music Awards, 3 MTV Music Awards, 5 Daytime Emmys, and a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. So that's why we are covering Kelly Clarkson today. And of course, like I said, we've got Jeremy and Pam here to help me break it down. So to start us off so that we can all, because I've never met you guys before. So let's just talk about, why Kelly Clarkson, when did she enter your life, and how did your Kelly Clarkson story begin?
Jeremy, I'll let you start.
She entered my life about the same time she entered most of our lives. And that was with American Idol back in 2002. I watched the show from the very beginning. I had no idea what the show was about or really what they were trying to accomplish. It just said, it was a search for a superstar. And I remember seeing Kelly's audition on TV. And, the story that I've told on our podcast is that I watched her sing for the first time and I thought, I don't really understand this show, but I think this girl here is going to win it. And from that moment, I was kind of hooked. We didn't see anything from her for a couple more weeks until they got to the Hollywood rounds. And from then I was just completely transfixed on this young woman who had such an incredible singing voice and was just so down to earth and just seemed like one of your friends, was just so bubbly and had just personality for days. And I was completely fixed on watching her and her journey through the show. And of course, when the time came to, really start voting and calling in and whatnot, I was an active participant and was so thrilled when she won the show. And I've followed her career intently ever since.
Amazing. So right from the beginning.
Very beginning.
Cool beans.
That's a very good old school throwback, and I appreciate that you use that.
Of course. Pam, what about you?
So my journey did not start in 2002. Mine started in 2004. So I was very young when she was on Idol. I was in elementary school, to date myself. I knew of the show. I knew A Moment Like This, Miss Independent. I knew the songs. I'm like, okay, they're good, whatever. I know that's like horrible for me to say now, but like I'm being honest. And then probably when I was around 2004, give or take, I don't really know what sparked it, but like I'd always been a fan of music, but never, it was very surface level. And then around 2004, I just like decided like, you know what, I want to start paying attention to more music. And I just honestly, I had a little boombox radio I kept in my room, and I would just listen to a lot of different stations. And this was right around when the song Breakaway came out. I really liked it.
Right.
It was when Since You've Been Gone came out. They put something in that song that did something chemical to me. And I was so obsessed with that song. And I immediately like went down rabbit holes on the internet of like message board, like looking up as much as I could about her. And it was very early YouTube days. And I just became so obsessed with that song that I wanted to hear it all the time. And I was like, what else does she have aside from a few songs? So I really just did like a quick, luckily there was only about 2 years to really catch up on. It wasn't that much, all things considered. Right. And I just did as much of an education as I could. And throughout the years, I really, got into watching a lot of her interviews and a lot of her live performances. And I guess long story short, not only Since You've Been Gone, but really just like watching her, her interviews as a very young kid. She is, what you see is what you get. She is so down to earth. She's so real. And I think as a young kid, having her as a role model really helped shape me into who I am today. So, it was a little bit of both. It was really music and her personality that really brought me in.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. So I more aligned with Jeremy in this, and that right from, RESPECT, she took the stage on the first live shows. I remember her in the auditions, but, she was wearing that horrible, I think it was like a pair of jeans that she turned into like a tube top or something.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I was like, great voice, but I didn't really know what the show was either. None of us did. I mean, I don't think they did at the time either. They were sort of like trying to figure it all out. And yeah, I just immediately I was like, okay, this girl's got to be the winner. Like, she's clearly the front runner. As she continued to move through the series, I became obsessed with it. The series itself, it was something that I ended up really enjoying watching with my mother, who was at the time sick. I ended up losing my mother when I was 18. And it was right around all kind of that same time of Kelly winning. And, we had this like really great connection. And so there's something really like deep for me with the relationship with Kelly Clarkson very early on. Is like, I remember that we both were rooting for her. The night that she sang I Surrender was like a very pivotal moment in my mother's journey with her illness. She was in the hospital that night watching it, and I was at home, and so I have like and Kelly was also sick that night as she was performing. She had laryngitis, as I'm sure you guys know. And I was like, this is it. Like, she is touching me in all the right ways, but also just like I fell in love with her personality, the cool beans of it all. And I just thought like, yeah, this girl is truly defining what America's Idol should be. And it was so amazing. And so obviously from there, we had her winning at the Dolby Theater. I'm going to admit it. I don't know if I've ever admitted this, probably to like some of my closest friends. I was like sobbing when she won. I was so happy. I was watching. I actually had to work the night that it aired, and I came home super late. And so I was like, I got to go to school the next day. I can't watch it. And so I went to school, and I didn't want to talk to anyone because I didn't want anyone to ruin it. And I ran home after school and immediately, put in the tape that I had recorded it on. And I was watching it by myself, and I was just like gearing up, watching this 2-hour thing. And then when they announced that she won, and of course she has her a moment like this, crying through the whole thing. And I was just crying right there with her. I was like so excited. So
did you not know were you able to not like know that she won? Or
yeah,
that was
that's impressive.
I don't know.
Impressive.
Because it was like truly like it was the biggest thing. Like everyone at school was talking about it. And so, I mean, everyone was talking about it. I was like determined. I was like, I have to find out on my own live. And I managed to do it. And I think that was also part of it, is I had hyped it so much that it was just like all these emotions came out, and I was like very excited. So I was a fan from the very beginning. and then, was counting down the days until we got to Thankful, the album, because it kept getting delayed and delayed. And I was like, we need this album. I need more from Kelly Clarkson, because it was back in the Napster days too. So I was downloading all the performances, and I would burn them on a CD and listen to them in my car. It was, I was kind of a diehard Kelly right from the beginning.
I always joke because during my surface level fan days, 2003, I also downloaded Miss Independent from Napster or LimeWire or whatever. And for some reason, there was no version out there that was actually the album version. It would just repeat the last chorus 3 times. So I never knew how the song actually went until I finally got the CD a year later. I don't really know where I'm getting at with this, but gotta love those days of LimeWire. Yeah. Do not miss it.
Yeah, it was, I think I remember it being hard to find too, because it didn't come out as a single that you could download or buy anywhere. You had to wait for the album back in those days.
Yeah.
And I remember, I think it was she did a performance on MTV, or she did something live, and they had pulled together the parts that you could actually hear her without fans screaming in the background and stuff. And it was this really pieced together version of the song that was not actually it. But yeah, I think I had that too.
The things we did back in the day.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so you said Breakaway was kind of your introduction. Did you go back, Pam, into the Thankful days, or is that for you sort of the lost Kelly Clarkson era?
Oh, no. So there used to be a website. It does not exist. So there's a really big message board called The Express. It still exists to this day. I haven't been on it in years, but back in the day, Jeremy, you probably have a memory of this. There was a website. It was a portion of the message boards. It was called KCE Media. So there were a few people there that used to just every single performance and every single interview that this woman has done from 2002 to I don't know, 2009, we'll say, uploaded all to this website. And I got God bless whoever ran that. I got such a good education from a very early age, because this was, YouTube was a thing, but so was dial-up at some point. Yeah. So no, I went back and I really wanted to watch as many performances as I could, because I'm this woman is literally a national treasure, and how have I been so blind from this for the last 2 years? So no, I definitely went back in time, and tried to watch everything I could, and got the Thankful album. It was the best day. Getting that and Breakaway was the best day ever. Yeah. I was it's finally here. I can find, I had my little Walkman CD player. It was great. So I was a little late to the game, but I like to think I caught up pretty quickly thanks to the Kelly community, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there any, Jeremy, are there any performances for you from her Idol time that really stand out as a memorable either performance or moment that you were this girl's beyond anything else on that show?
I mean, the Respect performance obviously really catapulted her. I think that's a moment when a lot of people really do remember her being on Idol, because by then there had been so many people that had come and gone on that show in the first few weeks that, and this was the early days of Idol when they really focused a lot on the terrible auditions because it made for good television.
Right.
And you sort of lost the really good singers in the shuffle. And so when she did Respect, I mean, obviously that was a big one. But for me, I will always go back to Big Band Night and her performance of Stuff Like That there.
Yes, yes.
I mean, that was just... It was a song that I was unfamiliar with, but I knew big band and music. I knew the sound, and it was just this performance that I could not forget. I could still probably quote it or recite it word for word, whether it be the interview portion afterwards or the song itself, because I was like, Pam, I went and did my own searches online for when that audio came down. And I played that in my car all the time because I fell in love with the song. I fell in love with her as a singer. And just, I mean, from that moment, I really do think, and I think I've said this on our podcast, that night that she sang that song was the night she won American Idol. It took a few more weeks for them to officially crown her. And yes, there was some uncertainty whether it was going to be her or Justin. And it turned into this, really cool, big pop culture moment, which, like you and Pam were talking about earlier. I can't believe you made it through an entire school day the day after the American Idol finale and not find out, because it was lit. I mean, people at red carpet premieres of movies were being asked, are you a Justin or a Kelly? Yeah. And so the fact that, you know, it was just this big pop culture moment still sticks with me. But yeah, that performance for me is what solidified me as a fan. And, you know, going back to what you were doing, you know, when you watched the finale, I didn't so much break down into tears, but I will say that, you know, we had a finale party with a bunch of friends, and there was a bunch of, and I think there was, you know, for every 5 Kelly fans, there was 1 Justin. So it was definitely a Kelly heavy room that was sort of rooting for her. And I just remember the room just exploding with cheers and screams and yells when she won, because it felt like we had all won. Because like I said earlier, you know, Kelly is very down to earth. She's very girl next door, especially when she was on Idol. And it really did feel like it was one of us who had just become a music superstar. And I think that that's one, and I don't mean to get ahead of ourselves here, but I think that that's one of the reasons why people like her so much, is because we all got to see a literal nobody become a superstar over the course of a few weeks. And we're like, wow, I am so invested in this person's career, because I literally got to see it, not even from the ground floor, from like the basement. And now, you know, she's in the stratosphere now.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think I agree with you on the stuff like that there. I mean, that was such a pivotal night. And, you know, I think also moving, like, as the top 10 was kind of moving beyond, I think, you know, there was a lot of Tamira Gray buzz that she was going to be kind of the front runner. And I think when she left, people started going like, wait, that Kelly Clarkson hasn't even been in the bottom yet. Like, she's been safe every week. And I think like when she sang that stuff like that there, I think you're right. I think it was like, everyone was like, that's our idol. That's the girl, because she's the girl next door. And I think Idol changed a lot. And, you know, you see The Voice and stuff now, is a lot of these people come from the industry, or they have backgrounds in music, or, you know, they're using this as a platform to push their career further. Whereas like back then, it was like truly people that had never done. I mean, Kelly had recorded demos and wanted to be a musician, but she really hadn't made her way in any kind of significant way. And so, you know, it was that kind of like true incredible moment that we watched somebody become a star, which I think we'll never really capture that again, unfortunately, because it was a really magical thing.
And it was the only show of its kind. I mean, now you have
so many.
I mean, yeah, and I know that, you know, like Star Search, but like, I mean, at that time, that was the only thing. Now you have American Idol, you have The Voice, America's Got Talent. I'm sure there are others. Yeah. So it's like, there's almost now competition among the talent shows. So it's a very different time we're in right now.
And you see a lot of contestants bouncing around from different talent shows, you know, people who performed really well on The Voice going on American Idol, and vice versa, and going on Nashville Star and, you know, AGT, and, you know, they're just trying to get their break. But you're right. I mean, I would say probably for the first 4 to 5 seasons of American Idol, it was really a pure show where you were just getting these literal like hayseeds of a kid from the middle of nowhere who just happened to have some, you know, natural talent and turned them into superstars. Nowadays, you know, everyone's got a professional backstory, or, you know, they've already got an album or something that they put out independently. So I think that that's just what made it all the more special. And, you know, for the fact of, you know, Kelly being the very first one, I mean, I think everyone whoever comes from any of these singing competition shows are always going to be stacked up against her.
100% agree. Yeah, I mean, it's just, it will never be that. And, you know, and then I think from there, what she's done with it. Cause like I actually, what was it? She was just on Watch What Happens Live doing press for the chemistry album. And I think I think it was the Plead the Fifth, Andy had asked her, can you name any recent American Idol winners or something? And she was like, I can't, I don't know. No. And I think like, you know, that is what the truth is of that too. Like people that are coming off The Voice, that's a show that they focus on the coaches and the kind of camaraderie of that. That's what that show is. It's not about making superstars anymore. Yeah. And so we got one with Kelly, and we've gotten some from American Idol from the early days, but Kelly truly kind of like defined what that meant and became a superstar. Yeah. Which I think, you know, as we kind of move through to the next sort of phase, is we got Thankful on April 15th, 2003. The lead single, as we talked about, was Miss Independent. It sold 4.5 million copies worldwide and debuted at number 1. Tell me your thoughts on all things Thankful and from that era.
I'm like you, Chris. You know, I really was impatient to get that album because I think Idol wrapped up in early September of 2002, and we didn't get Thankful, like you said, until April. I think we were originally supposed to get it in November, but, you know, there was a lot of delays, and then there was just, you know, all the stuff going on behind the scenes that we probably still to this day, and maybe we'll never know about all the behind the scenes stuff. Yep. But, you know, just it was such a highly anticipated album. You know, they got to sort of milk the 2 Idol songs a bit through the end of 2002. And then they had to sort of, you know, wait for a little bit. I think Miss Independent came out a few weeks before the album did. And it was such a relief that her first song that was from the proper first album was so good and such a banger because, and I've said this before about, you know, American Idol itself, but even I'll even extend this into Kelly's Thankful era. American Idol and its producers and its creators, and, you know, I'll even say to a slighter extent, the network, they needed Kelly to succeed, because if they have this brand new show, which at that point they still didn't, they may have very early on had just started the second season. I don't know. I don't remember my timeline, but they needed Kelly to succeed. They needed her to do well, because the entire reputation of that show was resting on how well Kelly Clarkson did. And so they needed it to be her to be the winner. And they needed her to have a big hit single and have a big hit album her first go round, because once that happened, that then put a lot of credibility on top of American Idol. And so she got a lot of help with songwriters, producers, everybody who could really help to make that album successful. They threw the entire kitchen sink at it. Now, it's funny to think about that from a 2023 lens, because you'll be hard pressed to find somebody to say that Thankful is her best album. But at the same time, for the day, for 2003, it was a great album. It was a great pop album. And it really showcased a lot of the different things that we saw of her on American Idol, where, yes, she can be a pop singer, but she also had a very soulful side to her that she got to sort of flex on the show, but not a ton. And then we got to hear it on record, and it was really, really good. So it was such a nice, I don't even want to say a surprise. It was so nice to have invested all of this emotional energy and time into voting for her. And then she came out and put out a heck of a good album for her first effort. And it made the whole thing worth it, I think, for all of us as fans.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, echoing a lot of what Jeremy said, they had so many big names behind it. But I feel like, even just looking back on stuff, like, I feel like that wasn't like overly advertised. Like, you got your Christina Aguilera, who co-wrote on Miss Independent, but then also, which Kelly didn't know until right before it came out. Yeah. But then you got like Babyface working on it, like Diane Warren. Like, you have a lot of big names. And I think that really, really helped. And even despite, like, you know, singles 2 and 3, Low and The Trouble with Love Is, like, they were successful, but they weren't like giant smash monster hits. Like, you know, having Miss Independent and throwing A Moment Like This and Before Your Love on there, which is familiar to people, throwing those on as like the bonus tracks. It was just, people, you know, I think fans back in the day were probably really excited to go out and buy something that they helped. Like, they were like, yeah, we got this person here. Like, you know, I helped contribute and I'm proud of her. So I want to buy the album and enjoy it. And, you know, especially in a time when, like, back when you used to buy like albums and stuff, like, you didn't know what the songs were going to sound like. You maybe knew 1 or 2 tracks. So, at least for this, people knew at least 3. And, but yeah, it's a really fun album. And I do think it showcases her diversity, that not only did she do on Idol, she continues to do 20 plus years later with all different genres. And yeah, it's probably, I mean, it's not my favorite album, but I absolutely adore it. Yeah. And I definitely think it is of the time, but that's all. Sometimes that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, you know, it was a hodgepodge, a little bit of genres, because she was this American Idol that they really didn't know, was she going to be, you know, it was the time of the Britneys and the Christinas and all of these things. So it's like a Miss Independent goes kind of down that road in a way of like, are we pushing her there? But she's also like much more of a vocalist than a Britney. And, you know, and she's not a dancer and she's not going to do those things. So we need to have some songs that like also define who she might be on stage. And, you know, and then, you know, it was interesting because we got the album, and then Jeremy, you mentioned because of the delay of the album, season 2 had started. Then we got Ruben Studdard as the second Idol winner and Clay Aiken as the runner up. And so Kelly's first tour when she went out to tour Thankful was the co-headlining tour with Clay Aiken.
Yep.
And so that was like the sort of first time that, and I saw that live, and
so did Jeremy.
Oh yes. Yep. Yes. I when they sang, what did they do together? Open Arms together at the end. Loved it. So good. And then I ran out to the bus and I waited for her to come out, and and I was like, we are staying. It was like getting late, and you know, we were still in high school or something. And my friend was like, I think I have to go. I was like, no, we're staying. She's gonna come out. I know we're gonna like meet her. And then Clay Aiken came out, and he was like going around and shaking everyone's hands. And I remember him shaking my hand and being like, hey, how are you? And I was like, good. When is Kelly coming?
Oh my God.
He was like, she'll be right behind me. I was like, great, awesome. And I could just see like, and then as he walked away, I was like, yeah, I probably shouldn't have done that. That was rude.
It's okay.
But you know, I was there for Kelly. I was there for the prize. And then it was interesting because it was like kind of the semicircle, and Kelly started on one side of the semicircle and was like saying goodbye. And then like her tour manager was like, okay, we got to go. And she was like, hold on, let me start on this other side. And so she started going down the other side, and I was like directly in the middle.
Oh, geez.
I was like, oh no, I'm not gonna get it. I'm not gonna like see her. She's not gonna sign my my program or whatever I had. And so the tour manager started to pull her, and I just screamed out, Kelly, I love you more than life. And she turned around and she was like, all right, I'm signing one for him. I don't care. And she like came over and signed one for me. And that's just
so nice.
And that stuck with me. And I feel like that defines Kelly in so many ways, because she's so personable. She cares about her audience. She cares about her fans. And like, she was that girl from day one and she's still that way today.
Seriously.
Yeah. I remember we did a meet and greet at at one of the independent tour shows. And they were they sat Kelly and Clay behind a table, and everybody had to walk by them, you know, and kind of we had whatever we wanted them to sign. And then we had a little piece of paper that had our name on it. And they told us, as before we walked into the room, they said, you know, Kelly and Clay are, you know, resting their voices. So please don't talk or, you know, ask them questions or anything. They're, you know, under strict orders to, you know, rest their voices. And we walked in there, and the two of them are just jabbering away. Hey, what's up? And they're talking to each other. They're talking to the fans. And we're like, are we allowed to talk to them? They addressed us first. Can we talk back? They're like, whatever. And so they were just, and I'm saying this about both of them really, but I mean, especially Kelly. I mean, they were just so nice and so kind, even though, you know, there's people around them that are, you know, that have their best interests in mind and are trying to protect them. But at the same time, they're like, these are people who paid like American currency to come and watch us sing. Like, we're not going to just sit there and stare at them and sign their paper and send them on their way. Like, we're going to talk to them. So, and, you know, she has stayed that way and has just been, and I think that's one of the reasons why I've stayed a fan for so long, is because the way she was in 2000, at that point, it was 2004, all the way up until today, has not changed.
Yep. Yeah. No, she's great. And I mean, and then that, you know, obviously we don't have to talk about from Justin to Kelly, because I know that's not her favorite part of the era.
Oh, trust me. We love talking about it.
I mean, I saw it in the theater 3 times, and
yes!
And I had it, all the songs, that I had ripped because they never released the soundtrack, so I had to rip it from Napster or whatever.
Yep.
So, but yeah, I was a fan of it, but I know Kelly wasn't, and and then it started to make sense because she, parted ways with the Idol management teams and kind of really wanted to redefine herself. And then enter Pam, because here we are at Breakaway, and Breakaway, the album, comes out November 30th, 2004. And obviously we got a little taste of the album with the song Breakaway from the Princess Diaries 2 soundtrack in July. But traditionally, the album's first single is Since You've Been Gone, which came out in November of that year.
Jeremy and I always have a debate about this. He's like, it's Since You've Been Gone. I'm like, I don't care. I'm going to say the first single was Breakaway because it came out first. We always debate about this, but technically you were right, but I refuse to accept it.
Well, and it's interesting because it did come out first. And so people obviously knew it. She had a music video for it. It was it was the single. But when I was doing some of the research, they consider it the 6th single from the album.
Yeah.
Which is so silly, but whatever. I will stop. I can get on a whole tangent about this, but I won't.
She'll take up all your time just going about this.
Well, I mean, and it's, rightfully so, because it really did sort of redefine Kelly in such a huge way. Breakaway was her most commercially successful album, and had, I guess, 6 singles that were, all of them, in my opinion, wildly successful. Obviously, Since You've Been Gone is most notable, but we have Since You've Been Gone, Behind These Hazel Eyes, Because of You, Walk Away, and then Breakaway. So tell me a little bit about that time for you. And I know, Pam, you mentioned a little bit about some of the Since You've Been Gone sort of fascination and obsession, but is there a song from that record, maybe one of the more deep cuts, that is a song that you still go to today?
It's funny. So Since You've Been Gone will probably always be my top, in my top 3, maybe even top, I don't know, but one of my favorite songs. But it's funny because as far as a B-side track, that's my favorite. It's actually a song I didn't love as much until a couple years later. And now it's what was I thinking? Hear Me. It's track number 11.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely adore that song. I think it's so good vocally. I love the lyrics. My dream is, I don't know why I would, but my dream is to one day hear it live. I know we're 19 years after the fact, but one day I'm praying. But yeah, that's one of my favorites. Addicted as well. I'm a little emo kid at heart, so I love all the angsty, anything angsty will always bring me in, but no skip album. It's my favorite. Totally. What about you?
Mine is Addicted is probably one of them, but I think what I end up listening to most is You Found Me. It's such a good, I'm today, that could be on the radio today. I feel like it would be a hit single today. But you're right. Breakaway is one of the greatest albums of all time. No skips. You could listen to it front to back, and there's nothing that I'm that was a filler.
Yeah, seriously. Which a lot of albums these days in general, I think there's always going to be 1 or 2 filler songs. I hate to say that. And this is a rarity.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. Jeremy, what about you?
For me, Hear Me was also a song that I gravitated towards. In fact, for a hot minute, my very first personalized license plate actually said Hear Me. And so it worked both ways because I'm on the radio, and then I also love Kelly. And so I was like, hey, this works. I can use this as sort of both sides of, my interests. But when I go back to the album now, I think one of the songs that I gravitate towards is Gone, because it was,
yes.
Yeah. Yes. It was technically, it was in line to be a single. I think it was intended to be, or at least they had intentions, but it just sort of, I think they did finally they gassed out that album. They got about a year plus out of that album. And I think there was by then they just had fatigue and they couldn't do it. But look, with the amount of singles that came off of that album, that doesn't happen all that often. When you start talking about, you know, five, six singles coming off of one album and all of them being, for the most part, super successful, you know, you're getting into the Katy Perry Teenage Dream, Michael Jackson Thriller. I mean, you're in that level of success when you talk about albums that have multiple singles come off of them. Now, by no means am I saying that Breakaway is, you know, the Thriller of the 2000s, but nonetheless, I mean, it was an extraordinarily popular album, and I think I think it definitely lives among the top albums of the first part of the millennium, definitely of the early 2000s. It's definitely one of the best. And again, it showed that Kelly had endless possibilities. She had endless opportunity because she has now superseded her first album. And that doesn't always happen with a lot of bands. A lot of times you get what's called the sophomore slump. They put out kind of a dud of a second record, but you know, a lot of bands are a little bit different where they've got their whole lives to write their first album. And then you got about 18 months to make your next album. So that's understandable that they would have a slump in their second album, but Kelly just got better and, you know, put out what is arguably going to be the, you know, the album that goes on her tombstone, if it will. You know, it's just a fantastic album front to back. I agree with you guys. No skips on the album. It's, you know, it was a landmark moment in pop music history, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, I think you said it perfectly, is they really gassed it out. I mean, because it's so unusual to have 6 singles and to continue to have, I mean, there's a lot of work that goes behind that into like, going on the radio promotions and really trying to push all of these songs to chart and do all of the things. There's a lot of effort that it takes. And so I think at that point, it was like Kelly was starting to work on the next record, but she also went on 3 tours for that record, the Breakaway tour, the Hazel Eyes tour, and the Addicted tours. And so she, I mean, and she was physically, I mean, I remember, you know, writing, I was a music blogger back in that time too. And I was writing about how I felt like she was Gwen Stefani on stage. She was like running around, sweating, just dancing. Like she was doing it all on that tour. And I mean, she was really nailing that. And that's a lot of effort. And so she needed to I think they needed to kind of come to an end. Also, she got her first 2 Grammys there. So she got pop vocal album. And then Since You've Been Gone, took for the pop vocal performance by a female. And then she won the MTV Video Music Awards for Best Female Video 2 years in a row, first for Since You've Been Gone, and then the following year for Because of You. And, you know, again, that doesn't happen. Like typically albums don't get to like be considered 2 years in a row for awards and things like that. And so I think it was just time for them to move on, but they could have probably just put that entire record out.
I mean, the era itself was over 2 years. If you want to, if you want to say like when the Breakaway song came out, which was like, I guess, July of 2004, through the end of the Addicted tour, which was probably, I guess, like August of 2006, that's over 2 years. That's insane. You would never have that nowadays.
Well, it's like a jagged little pill too. I mean, it's like Alanis Morissette did the same thing. She had like so many years where she just toured the same album, and especially in the pop music space, you know, a Rihanna, for example, people are like dying for more Rihanna music, and it's like, but for 9 albums, the girl was like turning them out every 9 to 12 months. She had a new record out, and because that's what they do, is they push that machine. And so for her to be able to take a tour or tour an album for 2+ years is incredible.
Yeah. And look, we found out later on that, you know, I mean, I don't want to be dramatic, but I mean, it nearly killed the poor girl. I mean, she was absolutely exhausted by the time the Addicted tour finished up. And, you know, I think, as much as I love the fact that she toured that album so much, and I went to all 3 iterations of the tour and I loved all of the tours, I think she maybe should have only toured at most the 2 tours. And she's even come out. I can't remember if it was her that we talked to about this or that she said in an interview, or maybe even one of her band members that told us in the interview. They were like, look, they're going to throw a bunch of money at us to go out and tour one more time. And this was the Addicted tour. We're like, what the heck? Let's go one more time. And
Right.
The Addicted tour was purely just, somebody put a ton of money in front of her. They're like, do one more tour. And, she came out of that. And I mean, I think Alanis had a similar situation where she was just physically exhausted by the time she was done touring that record, and she needed the time off. And, it ended up being a very transformative and very creative time for her between the end of the touring cycle and the promo cycle for that album up to the release of the third record.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and then that brings us sort of to the third record, My December. Obviously, there's a lot of feelings about the My December era in the fandom. So I'm going to be interested to get your take. It came out June 27th, 2007. The single, really the only single from the record that is a notable single, is Never Again. And the tour itself got scrapped after she made some offhand comments about some of the labels and the promoters, Live Nation and et cetera. So they ended up doing a smaller sort of thing. She had to switch gears, brought in new management. This is where the Blackstocks joined the picture. Narvel Blackstock, Reba's husband, she brought him on and started kind of her touring and appearances with Reba. They ended up doing the Two Worlds, Two Voices tour. But the My December era was a bit of Kelly's sophomore slump, potentially. But where do you guys stand with My December? Because like I said, very controversial time for Kelly.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy and I we've spoken about this, and for a lot of fans, it's their absolute favorite album. And I think for many, many, many years, I don't want to speak for all fans, obviously, but for many years, it was such a treasured thing because it was really it was the only album for a while of hers where she wrote on every single track. Yep. And it was so personal. And we all knew that. We knew it was not just a different it was a different sound, but I feel like the music critics made it sound like she went and did a total 180. It's still a pop record. Totally. There's just some of it's a little bit darker, but so was Summer Breakaway.
Yeah.
I don't think it was that jarring, but I think it was such a fan favorite for so many years because of its lyrical content. Mm-hmm. And I adore the album. And I think something that the two of us have spoken about is over the span of her career now, that album is 16 years old. Now that we've heard so many more things from Kelly, I still adore the album, but we're both in agreement that we don't love the production on it as much. Right. And I think because her vocals sound great, but just some of the ways it was mixed, we're not the biggest fans of. Yeah. But that aside, I think it's a really amazing collection of songs. Sober and Maybe are two of my all-time favorite Kelly songs, mm-hmm. and I'm so happy they exist. And it still did fairly well commercially. I think it still debuted at number 2 on the Billboard chart. I think Hannah Montana, Miley Cyrus was the one who literally beat her for number 1. But all things considered, debuting at number 2 is still very, very good.
Absolutely.
And it's funny that you mentioned the canceled tour. That was supposed to be my very first show.
Oh.
So I was devastated when it got canceled. I was like, no, I'm never going to see her. And then, they rebooked it into smaller theaters. And I think that was the right move, I think, with the sound of the album and the fact that it was not commercially successful. I think it was the right move. I don't know. I really like it. And I know there was so much drama that went on behind the scenes. Unfortunately, it's not necessarily anything that's actually rare for the music industry. I think what was rare was that it was made public in a time that social media wasn't a huge thing. I think that is why it was so buzzworthy, especially riding off of one of the most successful albums of the 2000s. So, yeah. I don't know. I have a lot more to say, but I want Jeremy to chime in here a bit.
Something I've never really talked about, even on our podcast, is sort of the what ifs that would have come out if this album had been really super successful. And I just wonder if, maybe Kelly would have reached a higher status of pop singer had My December been, an ultra successful album. Would she have been, and it's so hard to gauge popularity in 2007 to popularity in 2023. But, the original My December tour was supposed to be this big arena tour. It got scaled down to theaters. Could Kelly have been, a Taylor Swift level artist, had My December been equally as successful or more successful than Breakaway? And then, subsequent albums continued to do well. We don't know. I mean, it's obviously a game of what ifs, but yes, it is a fan favorite album. I think that it has gotten more appreciated as time has passed. It was, kind of, the fans always stuck up for it, even, when the album was released. I mean, I remember this was the first of Kelly's albums that really was a victim of the online leaking that happened sort of between 2007 and 2010. And I remember the day that this album leaked out. I mean, I will freely admit that I was one of the people that was listening to the songs as they were being posted on these blogs. And people were just like, this album is incredible. It's so different. It's awesome. It's great. And we all still went out and bought our copies and, felt the same way. But I think that people soured on the album, as it went on. And I think it's just because there are a lot of very fickle people, and a lot of people pay attention to trends and what people say in the press. And Kelly was getting a lot of bad press because of everything that was going on with the drama behind the scenes of, what she was saying. And, she had an open fight with one of the biggest music moguls in the industry. And if, you can't tell me that, he didn't, sort of blacklist her, an artist on his own label. You'll never convince me different that he didn't blacklist her and cost her some opportunities because of her open fighting with him. And, she did have the whole thing where in the midst of promoting the album, she dumps her manager. She signs on with Narvel, like you said. So there was a lot of transition when this album came out, and she was really just trying to become the artist she wanted to be. It was very important for her to write the songs on this record. And I don't think that anybody should be, put to shame for that, for wanting to write songs. I mean, I understand that music is a business and they want hits, and, they didn't hear hits, but they're like, all right, we're going to let you fail and let you see what happens. And I think in the end, you have a bunch of fans who really still love this album, and that's really all that matters.
Yeah. And she didn't want to make Breakaway 2.0, and who can blame her for that?
Sure.
I'm sure the label did. But and that's what they ended up, sort of doing later on. But, who can blame her for wanting, for being an actual artist and actually wanting to, 5 years into her career, make an album that she actually was really passionate about. Yeah. And to be honest, if she had been even bigger than Breakaway, she would have burnt out so much. Yeah. She kind of already burnt down Breakaway. I don't want to know what kind of burnout she would have experienced.
Yeah. She ended up sort of giving herself that break that she needed through this sort of slump commercially with the album. But I do think, and I agree with what you guys are saying, is that I think it's a fan favorite. Pam, you mentioned some of the songs that for me stand out. Sober, maybe, those are great songs that could have been great singles. I think it really is the production. I think if Clive had gotten kind of what he wanted, which is let's bring in some more pop producers and make it sound a little bit more pop heavy, I do think that we would have probably had a more commercially successful album. But it's part of her story, and it's part of what we have now in our catalog of Kelly Clarkson hits. And then you mentioned the 2.0 Breakaway. Is that Kelly's fourth album, which we can move to All I Ever Wanted?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
I mean, I adore this album. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. But it is a little, I don't want to say it's Breakaway 2.0 in terms of the way it sounds, because it doesn't sound like Breakaway, but I think in terms of making it super commercial and poppy, they succeeded.
Yeah.
They definitely succeeded.
Yeah, I mean, All I Ever Wanted, released March 10th, 2009, lead single, My Life Would Suck Without You. It debuted at #1 on Billboard, again, nominated for Grammys for Best Vocal Album. The single had the biggest leap at the time on the Hot 100 from 97 to 1 in 1 week. And then, of course, had the follow-ups, I Do Not Hook Up, Already Gone, All I Ever Wanted, and Cry. And obviously, there was a lot of, again, sort of controversy with Already Gone and the Beyonce song Halo. She did the All I Ever Wanted tour So a lot was happening at this time. And then she also had Don't You Want to Stay with Jason Aldean around this time or towards the end of this era, which was her first #1 on country charts. And so again, it was another transformative Kelly Clarkson era where she potentially gave in a bit to some of the label's demands of wanting sort of this pop take on bringing back, Max Martin and Dr. Luke into the mix, which again, she was very outspoken about at times in her career. But I personally, I mean, though I know Kelly has negative feelings about the way in which she was sort of forced into working with some of the folks on this record, I think it's one of her best albums, personally.
I agree.
This album I have sort of said is an overcorrection by the label, because I know they wanted her to get back to her pop roots. And, like you said, they brought in a bunch of producers and I think this it's a great pop album. It really is. And it is one of my favorites. And I adore so many of the songs on here, but it's almost too much of a course correction to where I almost think that even down to the photo shoot for the record itself is overly like poppy and saccharine and like really overdone. Mm-hmm. And she's super made up and it's flashy. And I mean, it is the prototypical pop album. And I think that while, yes, she's on the album, she's singing the songs, she's writing on some of the songs, I don't think that this album necessarily 100% tells you who Kelly Clarkson is. It does tell you that she's a great singer. She's got the chops to sing all different styles. There's some of her best ballads are on this album. But at the same time, I think that like if I were trying to show somebody who Kelly was, this is not the first album that I'm going to grab.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I loved it. Like I loved all of the imagery. But I'm also like a pop music lover. And so for me, it was like, oh, I could really digest that version of Kelly. But as a Kelly Clarkson stan and as someone who kind of understands her personality, probably even more now and looking back, I can go like, yeah, that's not her. That's not authentic. And that's what fans love about, I think, My December is that it's truly her. That album is her. And she wrote on it and she had kind of all of the, sort of creative direction for that record, which she made it very her. And I think in my opinion, is like All I Ever Wanted, though great, had some really awesome songs, obviously the Katy Perry jams that we got. But I think it was the next record, which is Stronger, released October 1st, 2011, lead single, Mr. Know-It-All. But obviously we got her biggest song to date, Stronger, What Doesn't Kill You. Her third #1, which remains the biggest selling single to date for her, and not that song alone nominated for 3 Grammys. And to me, that was sort of the marriage of what you were just talking about, Jeremy, which it was like we got our pop version of Kelly. We got some great pop songs that were, pop produced. But then I felt like the imagery and the way in which she sort of appeared on the cover and all of the kind of assets that went along with it felt a little bit more toned down into kind of what Kelly would have potentially liked.
Yeah, this is, when I say before about how All I Ever Wanted was a course correction and they sort of overcorrected, it's like when you're driving down the road and you kind of are not paying attention and you kind of go off onto the shoulder a little bit and then you hit the wheel really quickly and then you go off and you hit the other side of the shoulder a little bit. Yeah. Stronger is the album where we get back in between the lines and now we've made a really good down the middle, excellent pop rock album that has excellent writing. Kelly's contributing. Kelly is getting more and more involved in the crafting of the songs and the construction of the songs rather than just, writing a little bit and then going into a booth and singing. She's starting to take control more of the crafting of the songs, and we'll see that more as her albums progress. And this just all around, is an excellent pop rock album. I don't even think I could ever just call it a pop album. I think it's a great pop rock album. And I actually kind of wish it would have sold better than it did, except for the fact that the only downside of Stronger is when it came out. let's say Stronger comes out in 2006, 2007, it might have sold better than it did in 2012, because by 2012, the music industry itself has now shifted. We are now in an iTunes 99 cent a track Spotify world where the whole game is starting to change, and the way that people are getting their music is diversifying, and it's not about the physical sales anymore. And I think that had this album come out 5 years earlier, it would have sold through the roof and potentially could have sold better than even Breakaway did, because I think that, I depending on the mood that I am that on a particular day, I struggle between which is a better album, Breakaway or Stronger, because they are both excellent albums.
Yeah, it's funny, Chris, it's funny you bring up that whole thing about All I Ever Wanted, because it's one of my top 3-4 albums of hers, just because it always puts me in such a good mood, and I think it just has an amazing collection of songs. But you are correct in terms that it does not necessarily seem the most authentic to her. Obviously tracks here, a couple here and there do, but as a whole, not as much. I think I like the collections of songs better than what's on Stronger, but Stronger, is way more authentically her. So it's a weird thing to kind of navigate.
Yeah.
But I feel like the Stronger era was just such a fun time to be a fan. We got 2 big tours. And she was on Duets, that competition show, the one season, but it was almost like she was back on TV again, back in your home every week. And obviously it was a lot shorter and, not as big of an impact because it was only one season, but it was just a really fun time. And you couldn't escape that song. You could not escape Stronger. And it was just such an amazing time to be there and to witness it all.
Yeah. Well, and I wondered if you actually meant that Stronger was the Breakaway 2.0, and that's why I asked if it was the All I Ever Wanted.
No, I meant All I Ever Wanted in terms of the poppiness.
Yeah, but I wondered more, and Jeremy kind of touched on that, is I felt like I agree that if it had come out at a different time, Stronger could have had 6 singles at least. It has some really strong Kelly Clarkson music and songs that I think could have really gone the distance. I think the other thing about Stronger, where commercially didn't do as great, is because it was also a victim of all of the sort of leaks. And I remember that album was leaking like crazy, and we were getting the demos, and I was listening to them. But then the demos sounded different than the final versions, and fans were loving something that might be more poppy or more, rock sounding about the demo, that then it ended up sounding different in the final master. And that, I think, also sort of turned people they didn't know what to do, or they had also burnt out on the album a little bit before it even came out. And so that was, I think, part of that sort of outcome of why that album sort of dipped after Stronger.
Yeah, it's an interesting case, because this was the album that, like you said, we saw more of the cooks in the kitchen, if you will, of this album. I mean, we got probably 2 other additional albums worth of songs that leaked out prior to the release and even after the release of this album. And, I'm all for, the process and, and hearing songs that she's working on. But, she was asked years and years later about all of these songs leaking out. And she's like, I don't care from my perspective. She's like, I don't care if these songs leak out. I like that people like the songs, but it was more, she felt bad for the writers that were on those songs, because now they've sort of lost their ability to shop these songs around. And people may think, I don't understand how that really works. It's like, well, once it's a demo has been leaked out of one particular artist singing a song, like it or not, that song becomes sort of aligned with that artist and no one else is going to touch it. So, it was really unfortunate that we did have, the leaking that we did have around that album. And I could probably do an entire college thesis on this era and why this album didn't do better than it really could have, because this is, it's in my mind, one of the top 2 best albums that she's put out. And I wish it had done better commercially. I know that Kelly doesn't care about that anymore. But at the time, it was a big deal for albums to commercially do well. But, she got a lot of accolades out of the album. This is another fan favorite album that is very, very hard to skip songs on. I mean, maybe one I might do every now and again, but I mean, it's a very, very good album front to back.
100%. And then from there, we get her greatest hits, Chapter 1, released November 19th, 2012. We got 3 singles from that, including Catch My Breath, which was the biggest of the 3. Great single, one of my favorite Kelly Clarkson songs to date. And so I'm so happy that we got that. And then, of course, we got Wrapped in Red, her first Christmas record, in 2013. And that album went number 3 on the Billboard 200, which is amazing for a holiday album, and was the best-selling holiday album of the year.
Yeah, and continues to this day to perform well. I mean, year after year, that is one of the few albums that continues to get back in and chart year after year. I mean, a lot of times, artists will...
It's timeless. It really is.
Yeah, a lot of times artists will put out a holiday record. It'll chart the year that it comes out, and then you never hear about it again. But there are a select few that come back year after year, and, you really have to give a lot of credit to Underneath the Tree. I mean, they got together and they made a really, really timeless Christmas song that, I mean, I'll go ahead and say it. I mean, we hadn't seen the likes of since All I Want for Christmas Is You by Mariah Carey. There just really wasn't that song, that big sounding pop contemporary Christmas song that had come out since the 90s. And and I feel comfortable saying that because it's 10 years later and that song still is on every Christmas radio station. It shows up in every Christmas playlist. It shows up in all kinds of Hallmark movies 10 years later still.
Yeah. And I mean, and as you mentioned, it charts every year as well, the single. And so it has that sort of same Mariah Carey potential of it being one of those sort of classic Christmas songs that we just see the Brenda Lees, the Mariah Careys, and eventually the, Kelly Clarkson every year.
And I still feel, though, there are people that discover it every year. So it's which is nice. Even though the song is about 10 years old, you're still getting new people that are like, oh, maybe I've heard this before, but I didn't know it was Kelly Clarkson. And then it's so that's refreshing 10 years later.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. And then, so after that, we get into February 2015, we get Piece by Piece, which is her final record, 7th and final record with RCA. So the deal that came out of Idol. It debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200. She had the Piece by Piece tour. It had singles Heartbeat Song, Invincible, and Piece by Piece, which was the most successful from the record. Give me your hot takes on Piece by Piece.
My hot take on Piece by Piece is that I'm shocked that this album debuted number 1. That's the biggest thing for me because I would say, I mean, this is again not one of her more successful albums, but I'm going to sound like I don't like the album. It's actually one of my favorites. I really, really love this album. It has some of my favorite songs on here. It ended up producing one of her best tours that she's done.
Yes.
But
agreed.
There was something about this album where, it wasn't really super deep with singles. Heartbeat Song was a good song. It's a good, fun pop song. I don't know if I would rank it in maybe even her top 10 of all time, but
agreed.
I think what really buoyed this album is, and I'm sure we're going to get to talking about this, is the Idol performance that gave new life to a song that wasn't even recorded in the way that she sang it on television. So I think that had she not had that performance on American Idol, I don't think that this album would have even been nearly as successful as it ended up being. But I think maybe it could have something to do, and I haven't done the proper research, so I might be speaking out of turn here, but it might have had something to do with what was coming out the week that this album was released. RCA may have made a specific effort to put the album out when there wasn't a lot of other competition, because quite honestly, they had been burned in the past by the Hannah Montana albums. And, just getting completely railroaded by other really big releases the same week that Kelly's album came out. So yeah, my big hot take is that I can't believe it debuted number 1.
Yeah. I really like this album. I think it has a lot of fun songs. As Jeremy said, it was a really good tour as well. Something that the two of us joke about is how good the bonus tracks are, and why are they bonus tracks? They should be on the main album, i.e. Second Wind, the Maren Morris song, so good.
Yep.
No, I think it's a really fun album. Now, my only bone to pick with it, and again, like Jeremy and I are massive Kelly fans, but like we will have opinions from here, here and there. I think I can't remember if it was Wrapped in Red or Greatest Hits, but I remember one of the two not counting towards her album allotment and her not knowing that. So Piece by Piece, I don't think was like always supposed to happen. So I always joke to myself that this was we have to do another album under our CA album. And not that it's bad by any means, but for me, it just sounds like a lot of songs thrown in. And aside from, Piece by Piece and Tightrope and Someone, generally speaking, it doesn't feel like something that she would have written.
Yeah. It isn't very cohesive. It's not.
It's
like you've got the Sia elements, you've got like new things that she was trying, but it felt like it was a little bit all over the place. And there are songs on it that I really love. But I think, I agree with you that it sort of feels piecemealed. And quite frankly, like it could have just been sort of to that point, her song where like, let's take some of these scraps that I've like looked at before, or a couple of like, let's bring in this like Sia song. Let's like do this thing and just put all of these on a record and I'll put it out. Cause we didn't also get a lot of visuals for this record. We didn't get like videos, and we didn't get like an investment of her really like putting a lot of effort into the
videos were like nothing. The only nice part about the video was the Piece by Piece video when you had River in it, her daughter, but everything else was like, it was like, I guess like aesthetically pleasing, but there was no like storyline and plot. And I guess by that point, like music videos obviously are not what you don't need them anymore. You used to need them as a marketing tool. Now you don't, but you didn't get a lot of visuals. And what we did get wasn't anything amazing in my opinion. I do love the album. I do love the songs, but I agree that it's not the most cohesive.
It also says a lot that when you have an album and two of the songs on the album have versions that are more popular that were re-released later. So you've got the Piece by Piece from Idol, which ultimately was more popular than the album version. In fact, they ended up reissuing the deluxe edition of the album to put the Idol version on it. And then once she went out and did the Piece by Piece tour, you had so many people who appreciated and liked the live reworking of the song Tightrope way more than the version that they had on the album. And so I don't know if that says something about your record when you've got two different versions that are more popular than the versions that you worked so hard on to put onto the album proper. So just, something to think about with this particular album. It is one of her more uneven albums. I still really like it. There are still some gems on there, but and quite honestly, it's been the album that has grown the most on me. I loved it when I first heard it, but then, quickly it sort of fell out of favor, stacked up against the rest of her catalog. But I have come to really appreciate this album over time.
Totally. And, and I think, she was closing a chapter with RCA and then we had a little bit of a Kelly break. She obviously was also having a child, and there was things personally going on in her life.
Yeah.
But then we get to Meaning of Life in October of 2017, first album with Atlantic Records, the single Love So Soft. And then obviously at this point, she also has been on The Voice. She was hosting the Billboard Music Awards. And she really, at this point, was like defining herself as more than just a musician, but also now an entertainer in so many other ways. How did Meaning of Life sit with, you guys as huge Kelly stands sort of for all these years?
I think it was such a breath of fresh air. You could hear it in the sound. It was obvious. It's still pop, but it's definitely more, soulful R&B. And it was something that was so brand new. So when it came out, it was like, whoa, this is new and shiny and I love it. And you can tell that she was happy. You can tell that she was excited about it and passionate about it. Something that you really hadn't seen. At least I don't feel like I had seen in a while. And, even if, the singles were not, the most commercially successful, I don't think she cared. And at this point, like, I don't think the fans even necessarily cared. I think they were just happy that there was such a new kind of sound coming from her, yet it still sounded authentic Kelly.
Yeah.
In my opinion, produced her best tour so far. Meaning a Life tour was so much fun, and it brought her back into arenas, which she hadn't done fully. I mean, the arenas here and there, but fully since the Breakaway era.
Yeah. Or at least by herself.
Yeah.
By herself. Exactly. Yeah. As a headlining artist. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. This album is such a, like Pam said, a breath of fresh air because we sort of got to see authentic Kelly again. Now that she's out of her RCA deal, she's obviously looked for a label that is going to let her have more creative control over her albums. And so this is the first, this is the first album that we really get to see like boss Kelly. And, she's definitely got more of a hand in how every song on this album sounds. And it's just it's a completely new chapter for her and sort of a renaissance, if you will. And oddly enough, this album probably closest relates to Thankful in that it is, sort of Kelly's return to sort of singing a bit of like soulful R&B, still the pop flair in there, but yet, most certainly a different sound than we heard from Piece by Piece, from Stronger, certainly All I Ever Wanted. And I think it was almost, even a little bit jarring. I specifically remember listening to the album for the first time, thinking to myself, this one's going to take, a little bit of time to, really sort of digest and to sit with it because it sounded so different. But I think, looking at her career as a whole, this was such a freeing moment for her because I feel like she can finally breathe with the deal that she has with Atlantic Records, and they're not going to be on her case to, churn out pop records every 18 months. And, they're not going to be worried about having, big hit singles or whatever. They're like, you know what, go out there, do what you do, make the record you want to make, and we will support it 100%. And I love this album. And like Pam said, I'm with her, it's one of her most fun tours that she's done. And I think that this really did usher in sort of the next chapter of Kelly in her career.
And it also brought in from what I see externally doing our podcast, it brought in a whole new audience. I mean, I think this combined with being on The Voice and right as this era was ending was the launch of the talk show. And it really, a lot of people maybe knew a couple of her songs, like, they knew the Since You've Been Gone's and the Strongers, but the Meaning of Life era really brought in a whole new renaissance, a whole new group of fans that weren't as familiar with her older stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, in a new way. And I think, it reminds me a little bit of like when Lady Gaga, she did the Tony Bennett duet album, and then she was in A Star Is Born. And I felt like all of a sudden a bunch of people that had would be like, I would never listen to Lady Gaga, wanted to listen to Lady Gaga because they loved her in a different way. And we won't go down a Gaga path, but I'm like, Gaga didn't do anything with that where she actually could have resonated if she had released something a little more digestible for that audience. And I think that's what Kelly did on this record, is that she took all of these people that had fallen in love with her personality on The Voice and hosting the Billboard Awards and doing some of these things, that she was able to kind of translate it into I'm going to be more authentically me and who I am as a person now, instead of going and like releasing something super poppy that might alienate some of the folks that are watching me on the Voice. And, you know, Kelly doing like country and starting to sing things more. And then obviously with Kellyoke on her show, and really starting to show that she can sing literally anything that someone puts in front of her. And I think people want that. And so the meaning of life to me sort of ushered in that era for her of saying like, I can sing something other than what I've done for these last 7 albums. I can actually like completely change again and do something brand new and make it sound still like me, but super fresh. And so that, I think, was that album. And then obviously we got COVID, as we all probably want to forget, but we were supposed to get the Invincible Vegas residency, which got canceled. We ended up getting I Dare You as a standalone single from Kelly during this kind of weird time. We got a second Christmas record now under Atlantic with When Christmas Comes Around. And the Kellyoke EP. So lots of things happening during this time of COVID. She was still very busy. Obviously, the show continuing to go on to win 5 daytime Emmys. And then she got her Walk of Fame star in September of 2002. So she was incredibly busy, but not necessarily getting to like get out on the road and tour a record. And we all knew that there was one. So we were all waiting for it. And then her life imploded personally in a lot of different ways. And she went back into the studio to tell a different side of the story. And we got Chemistry on June 23rd, 2023, which brings us to present day. And I know you guys are getting ready to pack your bags and head to Vegas, where she is finally going to do her residency starting July 28th. But tell me your thoughts on Chemistry and what are you looking forward to from this upcoming live show?
Chemistry is the album that Kelly Clarkson didn't want to make. I think that's pretty obvious. We don't know what kind of album she would have put out had her personal life been a little bit different. So that's always going to be a big what if or a big question mark when it comes to her career. But we know that she has had a really, really difficult 3 years. And, you know, COVID on top of everything was, you know, probably more than she could have really wanted. You know, we're still learning about this era a little bit. You know, we're only a month into it. Mm-hmm. And it is, speaking just about the album itself, it is some of the most personal material that we've seen from her since My December. It is so incredibly emotional. There is just, I mean, this is sort of, I'm still sort of formulating the thoughts in my head because even still, I don't even know how to really speak about this era yet, just because it's so young. It sort of feels like another one of those course corrections where, you know, Meaning of Life was sort of a 180 from what Piece by Piece was. And then you got this incredibly emotionally charged album that comes out right after it, which I mean, it's still funny to me to say, you know, Meaning of Life was the last album she put out. And it just feels like an eternity ago. You know, I mean, it was 6 years ago. Yeah. And so now this Chemistry album comes out. It's incredibly emotional. It feels like another hard course correction. And so it's so strange to feel like, how do I not know what this all feels like? You know? I mean, what I love about it is that this could not be more authentically Kelly on this album. I mean, this is an artist who absolutely put her heart on her chest and just says, this is it. This is what happened. This is how I was feeling. I can only imagine how incredibly difficult this was to make this album over so many different circumstances. And yet she's put out an album that, you know, it's a little early to say whether or not it's going to be commercially successful or whatever. but it is certainly the most we've sort of been able to peel back the curtain and look and see into her real life. I mean, she definitely sings about relatable things on all of her albums. And I think that's one of the reasons why people, still love her music so much, is because, especially when she does these anthemic songs, everybody can see a bit of their life in what she's singing. And now we are hearing the real stories of her life, of what really happened, how she was really feeling. And I think that this is going to be a slow grow album, and a lot of people are going to eventually find it and realize how much they also relate to it, because unfortunately the topics of this album are going to speak to a lot of people. And I know a lot of people are going to feel the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this album is so special in terms of the sound, because this is honestly the first album I feel like she has kind of brought all of her music genres that she loves and put them all together. We got the pop rock stuff with Red Flag Collector. You got your dancey stuff with Favorite Kind of High and Down to You, a little bit of country and I Hate Love, a little bit of like an island feel with That's Right. You get more of the indie kind of sound with like Skip This Part and Chemistry. Like I could keep going.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that, as hardcore diehard fans, we've known forever that she can sing any genre. She loves all genres. And not that every album has sounded the same over the course of her career, but it hasn't been as diverse as this album. And I think the producers, Jason Halbert and Jesse Shacken, did such a good job with diversifying this album along with Kelly, and also really making her vocals shine and letting her vocals be the main focal point. The main thing that stands out, when often in pop music nowadays, it's not, it's often the vocals are often hidden by all the, electronic beeps, boops, whatever you want to call it. And I think that was refreshing. And in terms of lyrical content, unfortunately, because she's so much more in the public eye now than she ever has been with the talk show and The Voice, unfortunately, her divorce was made very, very public. And all the steps of, TMZ is constantly reporting everything.
Right.
So unfortunately, we know too much. And, that being said, I feel like obviously we don't know everything that all the songs are about. We can't take everything literally, but we know a lot of the background. And I think it gives us more context. And I know I appreciate the album more knowing that she was really able to like share her diary with the world. And I think it's a beautiful, beautiful collection of music. And to answer your second part of the question for Vegas.
Yes.
We're so excited. I mean, as we're recording this, it hasn't happened yet. We haven't gone to Vegas yet. So we don't know what any of the shows are going to be like. But to our knowledge, it's going to be a mixture of greatest hits, new songs from Chemistry, and some B-side stuff. So we're really getting a mix of everything. And I think that is so exciting. I don't really know what to expect. And I think that makes it even better.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really exciting show. It's going to be so great to see her back in her element. She really thrives in front of a crowd. And Pam and I got to see her back in April when she debuted all of the songs from the Chemistry album in concert. And it was a different kind of show. That was something that, needed to happen. And she really wanted to let everybody hear these songs. But that's not your prototypical Kelly Clarkson concert. I mean, that was a very emotionally charged storytellers kind of a concert. Now she's said that, there's going to be a storyteller vibe sort of with these Vegas shows, but at the same time, like it's going to be, as Pam said, a bit of greatest hits, a bit of fan service, a bit of new stuff. So we are so excited just to get back out there, sing the songs that we know, try to sing along to the songs that we're still learning, and just be in amongst, the people that we have been attending these shows with for the last 20 years. And it's so fun to be a part of this community that we've, either been just as fans or the community that we've built with our podcast. And so many of us have literally grown up with each other. I've known Pam, online only for, over a decade. And she's just one of many, many other people from all around the country and really all around the world that we've all gotten to know. And something like Vegas, where it's going to be just these 10 shows and that's all that she's doing for the foreseeable future, people are flying in from all over the world. And it's very interesting to know that there are going to be so many friendly faces that we have known for years and years, all in these rooms watching these shows. It's a bit overwhelming to kind of think about that, this moment of her back on a stage night after night has finally returned.
Yeah, very exciting. I mean, and she's such a dynamic performer. And obviously, as we just did in this, hour and a half, I thought it was going to be much less time. So I appreciate all of your time. But, it's such a huge career and she has done so many things. And I think to your point, she's being so vulnerable, whether she's being forced to because of paparazzi and TMZ and social media and all the things that kind of put everything out in the universe, but she's being so vulnerable now and she's really found sort of her footing. And so I'm super excited for you guys to see the show and to continue to see what Kelly brings us next. Before we wrap, I want to get, what is one song of Kelly Clarkson's that if you had to get rid of the rest of the catalog and you could only pick one song to keep forever, what would the Kelly Clarkson song be?
Oh gosh. I don't know. I have to think about this for a second.
I'll share mine and then while you guys think, because I put you on the spot because I was thinking, I was like, what happens if you just never have heard any of these songs, but what is one that you would keep? And for me, because of you, I have very similar sort of themes of how Kelly intended it when she wrote it. And that's just a song that defined so many things for me. It said so many things personally, but also so perfectly for me. And so if I had to pick one song that if I had never heard any other Kelly Clarkson song, that would have to be the one that I would take with me, is Because of You from Breakaway.
That's a good
giving
pick.
You guys enough time now to think of one. I know this is tough.
I have two answers. But Jeremy, do you want to go first? Because I don't know which way to go.
Yeah, I can go. For me, because I think we've sort of asked this question in different ways on our show, both of ourselves and of our guests, and I think for me it's still Stronger. For me, Kelly Clarkson is a big anthemic singer. She can sing the songs that sort of bring people together, just like how the country kind of came together to vote her as the first American Idol. And that's why, she's so good at these songs and she's known for them. And so, it'd be very easy for me to say, well, if it's not Stronger, it's going to be, Since You've Been Gone, or you can maybe throw My Life Would Suck Without You, or, there's a whole bunch of other songs that can be right behind it. But for me, Stronger is one of those songs that showcases all of the great things about her, showcases that she's a fantastic singer. I mean, you think that this is just a regular pop song, but go to a karaoke bar and try to sing this song. It's a lot harder than you might think. Not that I'm saying this from experience, but I've seen people attempt it and they've failed miserably.
Sure.
So I just think that this song perfectly encapsulates her entire career. It showcases all of the great things about her. And to this day, even though that song is more than a decade old, I never get tired of hearing it. If it ever comes on the radio or if it comes up through a shuffle or something, I don't skip through it. I listen all the way through it because it is still one of, if not my favorite song that she's put out.
Awesome.
All right. Well, I'm just going to say both of mine. Whatever. Okay. But they're for two different reasons. So in terms of like a general answer, I'm going to keep on going the train that you guys are on. I'm going to say Since You've Been Gone. I know it's just like it's probably the most basic answer you could give, but there's a reason for that. It's probably her most well-known song among the masses. And it really made me fall in love and pay attention to her as a vocalist and as an artist. And even though she has released so much since then, I just feel like it always puts such a smile on my face. Even if I hear it 10 times in a row, I've met maybe 2 people in my life who don't like the song.
Wow.
everyone else loves it. It's so much fun to sing along to. And at the end of the day, I just want to be happy and sing. And that is what it does to me. However, if we're going to do more of like a songwriting pivot, like, hey, then I'm going to go with probably sober in terms of just the arc of that song, the way it builds up and the lyrical content. It's just, it's magic. It is so good. So those are my two answers. I cheated.
No, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, since I thought it might be since you've been gone, because it introduced you to Kelly. It's why you're here today. And
it's really, if that song did not exist, I don't know if I'd be sitting here. I know that sounds extreme, but I don't know if I would be.
It makes sense. And I think, as Jeremy, you said, Stronger is the reason that so many people, I mean, as the most successful commercially single of hers, it's the reason that so many people love Kelly Clarkson. And it is one of those songs that comes on, it's an anthem. Everyone's going to sing along or dance to it. And so it's something. I went like a little more personal, but I think like her anthems are forever, her anthems and are amazing. And so, well, thank you for thinking of that for me. I know that was really tough for fans like yourselves to really just narrow it down. But I'm very excited for you guys to see the Chemistry tour or the residency in Vegas. And I know folks, I'm sure you're going to be covering all of it, but I know folks can follow you to find out all of your opinions on how it is. So share with us, where can folks find you?
Sure. Find us on all the social medias, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, which we're really starting to actually post now, 3 years in. You can find us all the places at Miss Indepodcast. So it's like Miss Independent, but instead of pendant, it's podcast. Yes. So yeah. We talk all things Kelly every week.
And we're for, the casual fans, the super fans, we don't like to leave anybody out. We love to teach people who are newer fans about the old days, if you will. We love talking with the people closest to Kelly, whether it be, people who have worked with her bandmates, crew. We've had the great opportunity to have Kelly on the show ourselves. So, we try not to leave any stone unturned. We love to have a lot of fun on our show, and we don't like to exclude anybody. So we would love for anybody to jump on. If you're a fan of Kelly and her music, we are definitely a show that you could enjoy.
Yes, it's wonderful. And it's available everywhere that podcasts are, Miss Indepodcast. And I keep having to say it very slow, but it's a great name, but I have to say it slow so that I don't say Miss Independent, because that's where I go instantly.
It's funny. The Kelly team, they were, I've heard just in passing or whatever, they call us the Miss Independent podcast.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? Fine. Go with it.
When you spent 20 years saying one thing and then you have to turn around and say it another way, I get it. I completely understand.
But Jeremy thought of that name. I will take zero credit for that.
Well, that's awesome.
Thank you so much.
And thank you guys for doing this and being here and deep diving into Kelly. As I said, she's such a huge part of my life in so many ways. And so when I thought about doing this deep dive, I was like, I got to bring in the experts. And so I appreciate having you guys. And I really hope that you guys have a wonderful time in Vegas.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun. And I had a blast talking with you. And anytime you ever want to gush about Kelly, you know where to find us.
I will be hitting you guys up for sure. But awesome. And then for all of you out there, thank you so much for listening. Check out Miss Indepodcast, and then also don't forget to rate and subscribe so that you never miss an episode of The Gist. You can find me on all the socials at CM Vetrano. I think we're changing the Twitter name to X or something now. So I'm just going to say all the socials. And then until next week, thanks so much for listening. We'll chat soon. Bye.
Bye.